Okay, everybody, I think it's 1 o'clock, so we're going to start. So, welcome to the Friends of Curry Campus speaker series. We put on these talks once a month. It's always the second Thursday of the month at 1 o'clock from 1 to 2. And they're always free. And let me just tell you what we have coming up. Next month, March, is going to be a talk about the salmon restoration that's going on in the area. April is going to be a talk about whales and their interaction, their interaction with kelp, basically, the importance of kelp for whales. Let's see, that's April. May, I'm going to be talking about Africa. And then in June, we've got the Galapagos Islands. So then we go into the dark 2 months of summer where we don't have anything. So one thing I wanted to say is please silence your cell phones. And if you have questions, better to keep them to the end if possible. If you have something that just can't wait, go ahead and ask. It'll be okay. So today we've got BillGorham, marine biologist. He's going to talk about tide pools, the things you'll find out there. We've brought a lot of show and tell stuff. And I'm going to start passing stuff around. If you can leave them in the containers, that would be great, because some of it's pretty fragile. And then I guess there's a table in the back that whoever gets them last, if you could just stick it on that back table, that'd be great. And then afterwards, too, you can come up and look at stuff and ask Bill questions if you have questions. So I think that's pretty much everything. So if you're ready, we'll start.
All right.
Okay.
Great. Thank you very much. As Vicki said, my wife said, I'm BillGorham. I'm a marine biologist. And I have said, well, a retired marine biologist, but when you go into marine biology, it's usually for life. And so, yeah, I retired, but I continue to do that. This is fun for me. I love this stuff. So I am interested in both sharing what I've seen and my love for it. So I appreciate you all coming. What I wanted to do was do a little bit about what you can find. How do the animals do what they do out there? Some of their biology. Why do the animals and plants live where they do? Because they're very specialized locations. And how can we use what we find there? Use it in an appropriate way. And then the other thing that's really dear for me is how do we take care of it? We'll have time for questions, but as Vicki said, we've got a whole bunch of show and tell. I love the hands-on sort of stuff. And so at that point, after we're done, I'm going to show you something. She's going to pass some stuff around, but you can always look at it afterwards. Okay, one of the most important things about beachcombing and tide pooling is being properly prepared. I taught diving for 20 years. I've been diving for way longer than that. And you always want to have a good buddy. And so I have my good buddy, my spouse. She is well equipped. She's there with her boots on. These are mine. We also are always ready to find stuff. So here is my beachcombing backpack. It's got room for the dogs, balls, and plenty of room for special treasures. There's also room for trash, but that's another story. What do you find there? I'm sure you're very familiar with driftwood. Sometimes there's a lot there after heavy-duty storms. Sometimes it's even hard to walk around. Other times it's a little bit more scattered around. Other times it's bare. We call this our Etch-a-Sketch beach. Most of you are of an age remember having Etch-a-Sketches and do that. When there's stuff there, you just turn it around. It's interesting when you come down, we've come down at night, or one day, and stuff all over. And the next morning, it is blank. Just amazing. After our dogs are done with it, it doesn't look like that. It's really messy. You can also find drift algae. Sometimes it accumulates in huge piles. I mean, they're 3, 4, 5 feet tall. And it basically is kind of like sawdust. It's all ground up and such. And so it makes it so it's tough to walk at times. Also, when it starts decomposing, it gets kind of smelly. Other times, it's the algae themselves. This is bullwhip kelp. It's interesting because it only lives 1 year. Every year, it dies off, and when those storms come in, it kind of wraps around, it rips it all out, and it can come up on shore. It can be a lot of it. Other things we have are foraging animals. It's animals that are running around doing things, or in this case, flying around. These are little sanderlings. These are amazing because when you see them, when they're flying, they're in such tight form. I don't know how they don't run into each other. Other things, burrowing animals. Here's an amphipod, a California amphipod. It's about this big, and they form burrows. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. Other things, microscopic algae. It's microscopic, so you don't see it. But that's one of the foods for a lot of the animals that live on the rocks. Other things you see are treasures. There are burrows out there that have been tumbled around by the rocks, by the waves in the sand, polished up very, very beautifully. Oh yeah, and there's trash. And the trash is, this was one particularly bad week. It was about 2 or 3 days worth of trash that came in. It includes golf balls. I know there are people that think it's neat to hit golf balls out into the ocean. They end up on the beach. Have fishing line and other things that gets lost. We have commercial fishing gear that gets lost. We have, and this is my particular pet peeve, it's single-use plastic bottles, especially for water. You just rent the bottle. The water's it's pretty much free. Also, other people walk with their dogs, and it's good. They clean up after the dogs and everything, as long as they take the doggy bag home with them. It is very frustrating to see somebody get partway there to doing the right thing, but leave it for the rest of us. All right, birds are very common. This is the mouth of the Winchuck River. You can see huge flocks of the gulls. And it's amazing to see how, again, they don't run into each other. This is an interesting picture, or video. I wonder, do birds play? Absolutely. These guys will fly up to the river and glide down. They'll come back up. We've watched them do it like 3 or 4 times in a row. Other birds that are common around there are the cormorants. You can see them on the big rocks, the big black birds. Sometimes they have their wings out trying to warm up. First time I saw a cormorant in its natural environment, I was diving in Monterey. It was about 25, 30 feet, and this bird flew by me. I went, whoa, wait a second. These guys actually do fly underwater. Other birds, you've probably seen the blue herons, other big wading birds. Somehow, our bigger dog can find these things. We can't see it, but Molly can zone in on them. They're interesting. They're very common enough in the intertidal, but they roost in tall trees. And to see a big, huge bird at the top of a tree seems just kind of out of place. Also have bald eagles. We've got several pairs that live down at the mouth of the Winchuck. It's always interesting to see that. Then when they're young, the young take about 5 years to grow to full adulthood. And so we can see them at different stages. So when I say for beachcombing and such, you want to look down, and I'll show you why you want to look down, but also look up. Watch the birds. Watch the things around you. Another one that's, here's a video of the pair of bald eagles that were sharing the food they had. I was also kind of impressed that one of them was being very meticulous. He took cleaning his beak after breakfast. Really common is the oyster catcher, and people have said that's kind of characteristic of an Oregon coast bird. It's got a dark body, but it's a very bright, distinct bill, a bright orange eye. The other bird that I really like are the osprey. The osprey or fish eagle. They are very, very good hunters. They will flutter up and stay motionless and look for birds, and on occasion they're successful. Here's a picture that Vicki got as one had picked up pretty good sized surf perch. So you can see, compared to the bird, that's a good sized fish. That's a real skill for those guys to do. And speaking of fisher birds, pelicans are very, very effective as well. They're also very big. If you happen to see one up close, you realize they're substantial birds. They're also great fishermen. I would not want to be in a little boat or on the water when they're going after the fish there. You've seen some pictures how they actually interact with other birds, not successfully for the other birds. Beach critters. Now we're looking at some of the animals that are there. I couldn't bring the birds in, but I have some examples of some of the critters there. We have some crabs. This is a striped shore crab. Vicky's passing around a couple of examples of those. Probably are familiar with them in any case. Now these are in a group of they're called crustaceans. They're crustaceans because they have a hard outer shell, and depending on which of the crustaceans you're talking about, they have many legs. These guys are called decapods because they have 5 sets of pairs of legs, hence 10. So they're interesting because with that hard outer shell, in order to get bigger, they have to get rid of the shell. They basically split at the back end and pull themselves out, swell up with water, and then they have to harden that shell. Not surprisingly, when they're in that process of molting and swelling up, they are very vulnerable to predation. On the other hand, you can a lot of times see these shells out there that are, you go, oh, this poor crab died. Not really, in fact, because those are the molts that will wash up, and the actual adult is out there. Here's a little purple shore crab, another one. You can see that they come in various sizes. That's a penny. And so this little guy, if I can get right here, that's a little baby crab. So again, what I'm saying about look down, look around, try to avoid stepping on the tiny little ones. They are out there. This is a red rock crab. Normally they're on the subtitle. They're not going to be what you're going to be seeing in the intertidal walking around. On the other hand, I like this picture because it shows this one is on the other side. This is a female, and you can tell it's a female because that's the back part. That's the equivalent to the tail of the lobster. That's wide here, and it's wide there to support all of this here. And all of those are where its eggs are. So that's a female carrying around a robust collection of eggs. Now the hope is that she was able to spawn those eggs, let them go out, and then go and molt. And this is just a molt. Other crabs. I like crabs. Sand crabs are interesting. Some people call them mole crabs. They live where the waves wash up on the beach. And they make their living by burrowing into it. This actually, its head, that's its back end that is burrowing into the sand. Here's another picture of it. Here, again, is the female, because those are the eggs back there. And when the waves wash up, they come up a ways, burrow in, and then stick their antennae out in order to capture this stuff. Here are eye stalks. These are very fine antennae that are out there. We'll see if I can make technology work.
I have one of these up.
There it is. Those are the antennae. Look at this little one. Every so often it takes an antenna and puts it through its mouth parts and wipes off the food. Yep, sorry. Yeah. Okay, hermit crabs, another kind of crab. The mole crabs, hermit crabs are kind of different for a variety of reasons from the other crabs that I showed you. Hermit crabs you probably have seen, they like to get old shells, and as they get bigger, in the same way as the others, as they molt, get bigger, they then have to find another new shell as well. You can see if you flip one over, it's very cagey. It starts to maybe come out, see if it's okay. Get a little bit farther, but if you get too far, it instantly flips over. And all you can tell is where you have the claws and the little antennae that are out there. They're kind of interesting because here is the 1, 2, 3 pairs. I said there were 5 pairs. Those are the 4th and 5th legs that have been modified to help them stay in those shells. Now the tail is back here. But again, I said about the females are large, the males are small. Well, these are specifically adapted to stay in those shells. So there's some significant adaptations going on. All right, other of these crustaceans are beach hoppers. This is about 1 inch long, and it's got bright orange antennae that are out there. I showed you the pictures, the burrowing ones. These are the guys. It's interesting, as they make their burrows, a lot of times they'll kick the sand out. And as they turn around, they'll kick it. Sometimes, in different directions. Sometimes, for some species, they actually make interesting patterns that are characteristic of what their burrow patterns look like. In this case, this is kind of chaotic. Here's another one. It's like him. It's about 1/3 of an inch, so it's about 1/3 of the length of the larger one. And these guys, actually, both of these are really, really important in the ecosystem there because they're scavengers. They will eat up all sorts of stuff. It said the kelp, so the bull kelp is there, or other pieces of kelp. If you're walking along and you see something there, especially in the spring, don't be surprised if it looks like it's alive and things are jumping off. It's hard to see because they're really tiny and almost transparent. So that you look closely and it seems that they're escaping, but they'll come right back. And they can do quite a number on stuff. And here's a pretty good example. That's what's left of a bird that had died, and the scavengers between the crabs and now the tiny little amphipods were working at that.
Do they bite humans?
Those are small enough that they don't, but they've got relatives that do. Occasional visitors, you probably have seen the California sea lions that are coming up on the beach. Well, hopefully not. If they're up on the beach, they're in trouble. They're not feeling good. This one lasted a couple of days before we saw the carcass that it was when it died. One of the things that's interesting, people ask about the difference between sea lions and seals. And sea lions have ears that are external that you can see. And here, it's kind of hard to see there. I'll show you in another picture how they're like. And on their back legs, they can swim around and sit on them. And they can use their front legs to push up. Now, if you've been, I'll tell you in a second. When you see them in a circus or SeaWorld or something, those are the trained seals that can do the tricks. The ears, so thank you for the question, you can see it here. It's just a little ear like we've got, the external ear. Now compare that to, and here's a better picture of it there. Compare that to seals, our little harbor seals. Harbor seals are simply, I think, fat hot dogs. They don't move. If you've ever watched them trying to get up onto a rock, you see them bouncing along. They can't use their flippers or their back feet to push them up. They just bounce. They're very blubbery. So there's a bunch there. Here's one. This is what the ear is. Let me get up. There you go. That's just an opening. Just like we have an opening, they just don't have this outer part. So the fact they can't put their back legs around, can't go up on their front legs, the ears, those are all indicative of a seal. All right, now beach tracks. This was one that really stumped us for a while. Those are it's kind of hard to figure out exactly what it was. And there's Vicky's hand. So you can see that was much bigger than your hand. So we dutifully went on the internet, looked at Facebook, and got the Google PhD identifiers of what this was. Clearly it was a bear, and they said absolutely, without question, it was a polar. No, it was not a polar bear. It was a black bear. And we haven't seen it again, seen the paw prints again, but it's kind of indicative that if you spend enough time, if you look around, you can find some really, really interesting stuff. Another set of tracks. This is kind of hard to tell, but these are individual footprints. And then we were thinking, oh, this poor thing. It's like its back leg was just dragging along, and it was probably hurt. We then had our neighbor that said, no, it was a beaver. That track was it dragging its tail, and it was very happy. The nice thing about the beavers coming back, it's indicative of a good, healthy environment. And so it's a good thing to see that. You can have indications. Here is what we call a beaver stick. And that if you find one of these things and see the really chomp marks on it, then you know they're being active. Whether they're making it for their beaver dams or eating it or whatever, it's a good indication that they're being active. Other tracks, and I think this was in the front. There's some here. They're typically pairs going back and forth, especially in the spring. They're very, very common. These are river otters. That's distinct from sea otters, and we really don't have sea otters out here. And besides, sea otters don't come up on land. But river otters can be very common. And they're really cute animals. And they're about that big. And here's a mom or dad with a little one being protective. This is video from a neighbor. And so it was kind of fun. And you can see where you could often see pairs of tracks as the mom and dad or the mom and dad and kids are there alone. Other tracks, just sort of randomly, we see that those are from deer. Deer go down there. Deers aren't foraging on the beach. Bears probably aren't doing a whole lot of foraging on the beach either. So, but it's interesting just to look around and see what other things are using the beach. Now look at a tiny much littler thing. We have, now this is back at that same amphipod that we had before. And you can see that it started here and it kind of got confused and it got up to there. So it was just sort of wandering around. We were surprised when we ran across early on these tracks. Sometimes they're very straight, other times it zigzags. And if you could see it up close, it looks like a bicycle tire. We're going, what the heck? What's doing that? Well, here are the crabs. The crabs have their 5 legs on each side, or 4 legs on each side in the claws. And as they're moving sideways, then it changes direction. This guy was on a track. And so you can see others just kind of go around. But it's kind of interesting as you interpret what's going on the beach, what things are going where. Now here's a snail. The snail was really creative, or it was lost. Sort of go, it's the loop-de-loops. But then this one decided it was on a mission. It was going to go where it wanted to go. All right, and here's a shot of a whole bunch of the snails all sort of going around. So if there are no snails there, but you see a set of those, you know that it was a snail convention. This is related to the amphipods, the beach hoppers. This is like a pill bug that you have on land. It's flat, and this is of relevance for a couple reasons. This is the tracks that it makes. It's just sort of chaotic. However, they're very good predators, and they go around, push through the sand, and will eat things there. The question is, do the amphipods, the beach hoppers, bite? They don't, so that we could affect it. These guys, I've been playing in tide pools, and they've been around, and they would bite the cuticles of your fingers, and it hurts. They're nasty little guys. Other beach trout. Here is a bunch of those moving along en masse. They're all in a hurry, it seems to be. So again, slow down, watch when the substrate's moving, you go, something's going on. Okay, other critters. This is a giant gumboot chitin. It's about the size of your hand, maybe a little bit bigger. It's in the groups of mollusks. And if you were to turn it over, you'd see this. And Vicki had sent around one of the examples of the gumboot chitin. Now what's interesting, you can't see it very well in here, maybe make out that there are plates in there. There are 8 plates. All chitins have 8 plates. The plates are interesting. This shows a little bit better. And you can see they're basically butterfly shells. Here's an example, somebody that had taken all 8 plates out and put them in a line like that. I'll say that took a lot of work because these are very well embedded into a very tough skin, so that getting them out without breaking them is a real challenge. What's sent around is the one that's partially opened up, and that meant cutting out some very hard sole on it. All chitons have 8 plates, but most chitons don't have a covering like the gumboot chiton has. Here, it just has a lot of junk on it. There's a barnacle, there's a bunch of algae, other stuff. Most chitons are able, you can see the 8 different plates. And many, many chitons are just beautiful. You can see the different plates, you can see stripes, colors, patterns. They are among the most beautiful animals that you'd never even think about. Probably familiar with this, the octopus. Now, we rarely see octopus washed up like this. We often see them washed up, but most of the time they don't have legs. I'll leave it to why they're gone and all, but I wanted to focus on 2 different things. One is their suckers. Those are the suckers, and you can see there are lots of suckers on every arm. This is a quarter. So that's a quarter. That's the size of an individual sucker. That's got loads and loads and loads of suckers with very strong arms. I've never encountered one of these large octopus underwater. I don't really want to. They are probably more afraid of me than I would be of them, which, considering what I would think of them, they must be scared a lot. They're very secretive. The other thing is right in the middle there. They have a beak. And Vicky's passed around an example of one of their beaks. It's just basically like a parrot beak. It's this big, and it'll come around when you have a chance. And it has an upper and lower beak, and it's made out of the same things as your fingernails are made from. And they are very effective at eating their prey, things like crabs or small bivalves and such. They can crush it with that. They also, many of them, can inject poison. And so you can get a bite. If you're pulled into the mouth of an octopus, it could be an issue. So it's you don't really have to worry. My neighbor, Ranger Rick, whom some of you may have seen last month, has done a lot of diving. Have you seen a big octopus like that? So in 50 years, collectively, nearly 100 years of diving, haven't seen that, so I wouldn't worry about that.
How big would you say that is?
Well, this is my boot. And so that is good size. The head is about the size of a basketball. And so getting that's probably 8 feet across from what the tentacles are. And they do get bigger than that.
Where does the blue-ringed octopus live?
The blue-ring octopus is in the tropics, in the Pacific, in the Indo-Pacific. And the blue-ring octopus is very interesting. It's fairly small, but it is truly deadly. It uses that beak, and it will inject poison. Some people have found them and as they're diving in the Indo-Pacific. And so this is so neat. I want to show it to my friends, so they put it in their bathing suit because they don't have anything to carry it. They don't want to just leave it around. It bites them, and they die. So it's a very interesting animal. I'd love to see one from a distance. So there's the beak that you're seeing, and it's an interesting apparatus. The last few years, you may have seen this. These are called valala or by-the-wind sailor. And they're big, not very big. They come in huge numbers that are washed up on the beach. I've heard somebody on Facebook, an expert, say that they were really unhappy with all the plastic that was thrown out on the beach. It's Mother Nature putting up these by-the-wind sailors there. That's when they're blue. Here is when they bleach out. And it can actually be so common, it looks like snow out there. So it's really interesting.
They
Sorry?
look like little jellyfish.
They are related to the jellyfish. Yes, very good observation. In fact, again, I have my quarter in there. You can see they can be pretty good size, like that, or little tiny ones. It's kind of interesting. They are related to the jellyfish, and you can see sort of the bell of a jellyfish. This is interesting because these guys, if it's an oval, they're all part, trying to stay out of the room here. That sail at the top is either canted to this side, or if you were to go to Asia and Japan and all, it's canted to that side. So out in the middle of the ocean, when the wind blows, all the ones that have this canted this direction get blown over to us. All the ones where they are on the other side get blown the other way. And here's another picture of it. You can see the oval, see the sail that is there. That's why they call by the wind sailors.
So are they safe to touch then?
Excuse me?
Are they safe to touch?
I'm going to kill myself on my boots. They are safe to touch.
Okay.
I wouldn't lick them, though. And I'll talk a bit about that.
I got a
Now-
question too about those.
Yes.
They seem to be seasonal.
They are.
Okay,
Yeah.
so what makes them wash ashore in such large numbers?
There's a massive bloom out there, probably an algal bloom that would accentuate or have the massive spawning, and so it's seasonal. I could go into a lot of reasons for why the seasonality, but basically you have the right conditions to have a whole massive amount of them, and then they do get washed up on shore.
Okay,
So.
if we have a lot of algae bloom, that's usually, they go together.
That's a thought. I'm not sure. So,
Okay.
but it's whatever causes them to be really common. Because if you've seen them, it's amazing. It's hard to walk without stepping on them. Now, like I said, they are related to the jellyfish, and jellyfish and its relatives are radially symmetrical. You can see you can divide it into quarters. This is either their gonads or their stomachs, different parts that are there. You see things radiating out. They do actually have little eyes out there. So if you're out looking at things that think people are, something's watching you, they are. And it's interesting because it actually does have nerves radiating out. That's how it can be telling light from dark. Doesn't do much more than that. Normally, you just see the sort of blobs that are over on the side. These are interesting because they do move around. You can see the little stinging cell or the little tentacles, and those have the stinging cells. The stinging cells are interesting because all of the jellyfish and the anemones have those stinging cells. Talk about that more in a bit. This is a part of a jellyfish that washes up. It's got algae inside. That's why it's not clear like the other ones. That you can see in the dark spots, it's kind of a yellowy green. Those are zooxanthellae. Those are algae that live symbiotically with the jellyfish. And it's a fairly good deal. The algae gets the waste products of the jellyfish. It gets a place to live. It's pushed up near the sunlight, so that works well. Jellyfish gets all the food that the algae makes, and it gets it's a very effective balance that you've got there. That's very common food, favorite food, in fact, of leatherback turtles. And that's interesting in that this orange area, from a little bit north of us all the way up to and actually beyond British Columbia, is an area that these leatherback turtles go to feed. That is a critical habitat for the endangered leatherback turtles. They go up there, and it's cold water, which you think, well, turtles usually have warm water. These guys are doing well up there because there is so many jellyfish there. But if you have seen what happens when white trash bags get in the water, they look a lot like that. So when a leatherback turtle eats a jellyfish like that, it gets food. When a leatherback turtle eats a white plastic garbage bag, it can't digest it. It can't move it through. So that's another reason why I don't really like plastic, especially plastic bags. Other things you can find out there are, in this case, it's kind of a soft, spongy finger-like things. It's a sponge, and Vicky's passing around several examples of those. They're common enough. They're really, really, really simple animals. They have some spicules, some things inside them that give them some structure. They feed by pulling water in and filtering it and pushing it out through a central pore. And so you may find those. Oftentimes what we have here, they are bright orange. That orange fades fairly quickly in the sun. They come in different colors there just based on how much they've lost the color. Other things, there was a really interesting debate just a week or two ago about this. They were trying to decide what is it. It looks like chewing gum. It's that bright orange, bright yellow, red. I'm not good on colors, yeah, clearly. But this is another kind of sponge. And sponges are amazing. They come all sorts of types. Some that just look like a piece of some paint that's been spilled. Others that are huge, that are like big vases. Other things that you might find are this kind of wood. This is what I'd call wormwood. And they're shipworms that will burrow into the various pieces of wood, which if it's a piece of driftwood, great. If it's a ship, it's not so good. If it's a pier, it's a problem because as you can see, as this will go around, there are huge holes in there. It's amazing because the animals are able to burrow through there and kind of avoid hitting one another. That means that there's a lot that can be there, as you can see with these. Now it's interesting because, as you can see, there's a lot of space that it gets used. It's not a worm. It's not a worm. It's actually related to clams.
And if you took that dried one, didn't put it in the water, would it get wet?
It would. The animals that are in it, because it's been out for as long as it has, they've all died. So this is good for showing, and it doesn't smell, which is good.
It won't come back if you put it in the water.
Correct. Yep. So.
Hey, Bill?
Yeah.
So when you see that in like that hardened clay, is that the same thing?
You see this in the hardened clay?
Yeah.
That's probably a different thing, different situation. That's also caused by a clam, but the clay, and I'm relying on my friend Chris Natenstadt as a geologist because I was asking him about it. And it's interesting because these are clams that start and they burrow in the same kind of way as these guys do. And as they burrow down, they get bigger and bigger till you get to the point where they can't get out because the opening is bigger than their shell is. So here's this sort of schematic of what the shipworm is. This is the shell at the bottom that it uses to push around with its foot so that it grinds off the wood, which it does actually eat. Then you have the body and the gills coming out, and like a regular old clam, it will pull water in, filter it through its gills, and eat that. So it has two sources of food. But when this stuff falls apart, then it's probably going to not be viable after that. And especially once it dries out, all the clams, the shipworms, will have died. We'll also see this, which is one of the best names I've heard. It's called a big skate, because it is a big skate. You can see my foot here. So that's like 3-4 feet across. Beautiful animals, really cool animals. And they make their living by swimming around, using those wings, stirring up the sand, and eating what's in it. Well, even big skates have to start somewhere, and so that's a little big skate. You can see the difference in size. Here is a chuck-it ball thrower, the size of a tennis ball. And so you can see that's fairly small, and I've seen even smaller ones than that. So they are common enough, and they start before that in something like this. This is a shepherd's purse. And basically, it's an egg case of these guys. This is when you found a really pretty one, it's nice and shiny and full. Hopefully it's already released that the baby's in it. And there are, when they dry out, you can see them looking kind of like this, but this gives you an idea of how big they are. And there's some things on the sides to help them attach to stuff. And so that's what the little skates come out as. Now the skates, like I said, will swim around, stir up the bottom, and get food out of that. And they will find worms or find clams, other things, so they have some pretty sharp teeth, pretty strong jaws to crush those things and eat them. So they are closely related to sharks. Speaking of which, you might have seen these guys, especially your common out there. That's a salmon shark. Salmon sharks, what we saw, this one was about dog size. Big ones can get up to maybe 8, at most 10 feet long. They can be confused with great white sharks because their body forms are very similar, but they don't get up to be the same size. Now, a neighbor took this video. She thought she'd record it for posterity because her son and husband were out surfing, and so she wanted to show them what they were surfing with. Not to do too much for the sounds on that. Other big critters, since we're talking on that side, whales wash up. This is a picture from a couple of years ago that was a fin whale, but a couple of weeks ago, there's another fin whale that washed up. The best thing I can say about this and the opportunities that those present is it gives you a chance to see their baleen. And the baleen are all these things, and they're multiple plates. And Vicky's passing around some pieces of baleen. Baleen, again, this is like your fingernails. And this hard edge is the part that's out. These are plates one after another. This inside part is frilly like that because of the rubbing on the tongue. So what the animal will do is it will open its mouth, take a big gulp of water, close its mouth so that the baleen rests against the bottom there, and then use its tongue to push the water past that baleen, and the baleen will filter out the food that it eats, and then it can swallow that. So these don't have teeth, they just have the baleen. So we've been fortunate. I think we have. I'm not sure that the whales have because we found a fair amount of that stuff. While I'm talking about what we've got from the baleen, other things we've had that have come up, one thing in particular, I'm a marine invertebrate zoologist, so I'm not a vertebrate whale biologist, but I'm pretty sure these are the scapulas, these are the shoulder blades of a small, probably the same whale as provided us those. So this is a baby whale, a little whale. So you can imagine the size of those. Again, it's the sort of thing that the treasures you can find if you keep looking around. And that's a selection of the baleen that we just looked at. Other things that are surprises. I felt like I was doing something right. Poseidon smiled on me because I was walking along. The beach was pretty much empty as it typically is. And right there, with very little stuff around, was the biggest abalone shell I have ever seen. Wow. 10 1/4 inches long. Wow. And I was pleased because about a year earlier or so, Ranger Rick, my neighbor, again, you know him, he was saying how he would walk around and he found one pretty much the same size. It's like, wow, it's incredible. And there were some other people that were walking around in the beach, and I said, glad you didn't notice it. Weren't looking around. So the lesson to that is that for your own therapy, for doing this, go to the beach as much as you can, look around and take your time to try to see what's there. Try to enjoy the stuff that Mother Nature is providing. The last one, that you might have seen this stuff. It kind of looks like styrofoam. And it's a bunch of tiny little balls, tiny little eggs. Those are lingcod egg masses. So the nice thing about that, at least I take it, is that if there are a lot of these lingcod egg masses out there, the lingcod are probably doing pretty well, which is really nice. If you've ever caught lingcod, they're a very good fish to catch and to eat. They come in different sizes of egg masses and such. And our dog, Molly in particular, such a good scavenger. She loves these things, but I mean, gets its fresh eggs, so it's probably not as bad as the other stuff she tries to eat. Of course, there are a variety of other things. Some of the stuff that gets consumed, or it gets worked on by the amphipods and other critters, get some strange things to just be watching. Okay, now let me switch a little bit and talk about the intertidal. The intertidal's got to be one of the most difficult places to live. And if you think about it, it gets wet and can dry out twice every day. So if you're living out there, sometimes the tide's going to be out, and now you have to deal with drying. Or you're kind of got used to that, and the water comes in. Not only does the water come in, but the waves come in. And so everything, it's trying to knock you off. So you have to be holding on really well. You don't want to be floating away, because then you're not where you want to live. You want to avoid overheating or cooling or freezing even. So in the winter, when the tide's out, you've had snow, you've had it really cold. And then the water comes in and suddenly you're back at seawater temperature. Or as has happened, you probably all remember when we had the huge heat wave. There were 2-3 years ago, there were reports of many creatures in the intertidal that just died from the overheating. And even if they're in a tide pool, it could be that heats up, and just like when they talk about the frog in a boiling pot of water, that can be detrimental. Everything's trying to eat everything else, or everything's food for something else, so you need to be able to avoid your predation. You have to tolerate salt water and rain, so fresh water. Where we are, there's a lot of water that flows out from the groundwater into the upper part of the intertidal. And I haven't measured it, but I'm pretty much sure that at times that's fresh water that the animals, the crabs and the snails have to deal with. Other times, if they're in a tide pool and it starts evaporating, it can be very, very salty. And of course we have us, humans, as we walk around out there, going to be stepping on stuff. It's maybe a double-edged sword in that if you don't go with the right shoes, you will discover that you should have gone with the right shoes. I've seen plenty of people do that. Now I want to stop for a second. How many of you have read Cannery Row? Familiar with that? The guy that's the lead character, Doc Ricketts, it's Ed Ricketts. He's a real guy. He was a good buddy with John Steinbeck. And in fact, he and Steinbeck, actually it was Doc and Jack Calvin, wrote this book. And the book was an account of the habits and habitats of some 500 of the common conspicuous seashore invertebrates of the Pacific coast. You can tell he was a scientist. It's like, okay, you're bored by the time you got through the title. On the other hand, that is kind of the Bible for intertidal stuff. And in fact, it's gone through 5 editions. And here's mine. And you can see it is very, very well worn. If you're really interested in trying to understand some of the stuff I'm going to talk about or have talked about, that is an incredible resource. And again, Doc Ricketts was a real guy who did a lot of work with John Steinbeck. Okay, we've got high tides and low tides. And in fact, there's 2 high tides every day, 2 low tides virtually every day. And there are high tides, the ones that are typically the highest, and there's low high tides. And they have low tides and high low tides. So it's this sinusoidal. But if you're interested, you hear about the tides that say, well, it's a -1 tide, or it's a +8 foot tide. You never hear of a minus 8-foot tide unless you're someplace that's got massive tidal changes. Because what the scientists and the oceanographers did is say, what we're worried about is running aground. So they take the lower of the daily low tides and take the average of that. They take the mean of that. So you hear MLLW, mean lower low water, is the 0 mark. That's the average over the years. And so that's what is our 0 tide. And so you're taking the lower tides to begin with, and it's when it gets way below that. Around here, if you get a minus 2-foot tide, it is really low.
That's pretty low.
If you get an 8.5 foot, a 9-foot tide, it's like this. And there's your minus 2.5 foot tide. So people talk about king tides. And basically the king tides are those times of the year where the highest high tides are really high. That's when you get your 8.5 foot tides. But you also get your minus 1, minus 2 foot tides. So it all won't go into that. That's an oceanography class we could take later. Okay, looking to the rocky shore, I taught classes and I take them out to the shore and said, what's there? And the response was algae-covered rocks. I said, all right, let's dig a little bit deeper than that. We also have tide pools out there, and the tide pools are kind of good because they can be like a refuge for animals that don't want to get dried out too much. But it's not necessarily the best place to be if it gets suns out and that water starts heating up. You may or may not benefit from it. You also have seagrass beds. Seagrass beds can occur in tide pools like here or out on sand flats. And seagrass are the only flowering plant that lives fully in the ocean. There are other plants that will tolerate it. These guys are fully in the ocean. You also have a community of critters. You can see, in this case, we have some barnacles, different kinds of barnacles. We have marine mussels. There's a whole lot of stuff there. And I've got this, which is kind of an example of put all the mussels together, and then you have the barnacles and everything else. Not surprisingly, all sorts of critters live in that mess, that mass. And so when you lose something, you can lose not just a mussel or a species of barnacle, it's a whole community. So it is a big deal. Here's a picture that probably doesn't mean much. It's turned it over, and there are a lot of animals, and I'm going to show a little close-up of that shot later. But even under the rocks, every space is occupied. Space is at a critical premium in the ocean. Even things that look wide open have bacteria or other things on them. So space does not go wasted. There's zonation. If you go out there and you notice that there's some things that are high up, some stuff that doesn't go very high, give a little bit better examples as we go along. At the very top, you have a splash zone. That's above the higher high water. It's where the only water gets up there gets splashed by the waves. And that's how it gets its water. Very few animals can tolerate that. In fact, some that tolerate that will drown if they're kept in water, seawater. Now here's an example. Here's my quarter again. Give you some size perspective. You have these little periwinkles that are up here. And so they can survive up there. They're the ones that are crawling around and eating that microscopic algae. So they're good for that. You have the high intertidal. So now that's the area that does get the highest of the high water. It sort of varies a lot. So we're talking general groupings here. And examples there is a turban snail, a bunch of turban snails. We also have limpets that are related to the snails. And what they're doing is they will congregate together when it's lower tide or it's daytime. During the night, or when it's safe, when there's plenty of moisture in the air, they'll cruise around, and again, they are eating that microscopic algae. Mid-intertidal is kind of the big band that's in the middle, so straightforward. There's upper parts, there's lower parts. but you do get some interesting banding even at that. Now here's an example where the mid-intertidal, these are all marine mussels. That's a pretty distinct line, and here are starfish. Starfish are active predators on marine mussels. They can't tolerate as much dryness as these guys can. So you have this break right here. Here are anemones that are down there, so they too are restricted as to how high they go up. Mussels don't care about the anemones, mussels care a lot about the starfish. Here's another good picture of that, how the starfish are there, and it's pretty distinct break. Okay, then you get the low intertidal, and that's where you get animals that are not very tolerant of being dried out. They're a lot more similar to what's out in the subtidal, but they can do some. Then, of course, you get to the subtidal, which is its whole separate community, which we'll talk about at another time. Okay, the algae. This one's kind of well named. It's a tar spot algae because it basically looks like somebody dripped tar on the rocks. It's not very exciting, but it's effective. It's found its niche. Other kinds of algae, this is one that's kind of a bristle pad alga, Endocladia. Those both are very high up in the intertidal. Others you have, I put this slide in particular because there's a variety of little algae in here. Here's one we'll see in a second. There's, don't see the tar spot. Here's the bristle stuff. The big thing is, see how shiny a lot of it is? Rule of thumb, if it's shiny, it's slippery. Do not step on the slippery stuff. You will very quickly understand why if you don't follow that rule. That doesn't mean walk on the other stuff. Be careful where you walk. In fact, it's always a good idea to have the right shoes and make sure that you've got multiple points of contact. Because if you don't, you'll have many more points of contact than you wanted. There's just another one of the common algae. It's actually a brown alga. It's like, okay, the scientists don't have any better color than I have. So this is kind of interesting. This is an alga that actually forms a crust. And it's an encrusting algae it's just sort of a film, but it also has a shell. That's why it's a coralline algae. It's a plant that has like a coral outer shell. And so it can still survive with that. Other kinds of feather boa, you might see it up on shore. You have these floats that keep it up. Just so there are all sorts of ways these things make a living to make sure they are around. Now, I was told that I have to talk quickly, but not too. I want to touch on the biggest group in the ocean these are the mollusks. We've talked about the octopus. They're also related to the squid. Talked about the chitons. They all have 8 plates. Talked about snails, limpets, and abalone. They have their one main shell. Clams and mussels are in the same group. They're bivalves. They have 2 shells. They have their own unique way of making a living. The interesting thing about all these except for the bivalves, they have a radula. It's an unusual thing. It's basically a flexible file. They use their mouth, up here, they can push it out and put it onto the substrate, whether it's algae or another animal, and use these teeth that are part of that radula. You can imagine if you have a file like that rubbing against your skin, it's going to take it off very effectively. And I mentioned that it's not only snails and limpets and kites, the octopus also have that. The octopus have that beak and a radula, so they're pretty well equipped to eat whatever they want. Quickly, a little bit on the barnacles. Barnacles are interesting. These are the volcano barnacles. They come in big size, little size. You can see examples over there, some pretty big ones. They're interesting because they gave up their cousins, because they're all crustaceans. They start out as regular crustacean larvae, but at some point they go, this cruising around, that's not for me. They managed to cement their head to the substrate, and then they modified their legs to filter stuff out of the water. So what you're seeing there were their back legs pulling stuff out of the water. Now here's what I'm pointing out, here we start with the larvae that have been released and everything, just a regular sort of good crustacean. And at this point, they go, nope, we're staying put. They go through the metamorphosis, and then they're here as adults. They're hermaphrodites. They're male and female. So if you can get from one to the other, you're guaranteed that you're with somebody you can reproduce with. However, you're sessile. You can't move. So you have to manage to get from where you are to wherever your neighbor is. And so as a consequence, size for size, they have the largest penis in the entire animal kingdom. They have to get all the way across. Fun fact. So there are other kind of barnacles. These are interesting. They're gooseneck barnacles. They have basically the same barnacle on the top, except beneath that is a sort of a tube. It's called a peduncle. These related to crabs and lobsters, and I haven't tried it before, but I've been told that the tissue in that peduncle tastes like lobster. Now the problem is you can see the clumps over on the side. If you rip off that clump, it takes a long, long time for it to recuperate. So if you do decide to do that, please be judicious about it. Better yet, find somebody that specializes in that. Echinoderms, real quick. There are a variety that you see out there, a bat star, leather star, blood star. You won't remember this when you're out there, but there are a bunch of different kinds. And here's the most common one. It's the purple, and it's got orange types. They are there. Showed them in the other pictures. When they wash up on shore, it loses a lot of the color. This one can't quite figure, is it purple? Is it orange? It's not very woke. So, sea stars, just real quick, what's special about these guys? They are 5-part radial symmetry. You'll always find 5 or some multiple of 5. You'll have a central stomach with a digestive gland that goes out in the arms. But these are unusual. They don't pull things into their stomach. They push their stomach out to what they're eating. So they use these tube feet, pull the shell of the mussel apart just enough so they can stick their stomach in and start digesting it while it's sitting there. So if you're a mussel, you're feeling you're just being digested from, so it's kind of gruesome. You also have the water vascular system. It's the tube feet. You can see the tube feet, the little white things here that are being used to hold onto things and move things around. It's all using seawater and pumps and such. Pretty amazing. And they do have loosely connected bones. And those bones are interesting because working with the muscles, it can be very, very rigid, or it can be very flexible, and they can move around very effectively. Most of them can regenerate arms as long as they have an arm and a little bit of the central disc. They can regenerate almost an entire animal.
Wow.
So here's a picture of the loose structure of their bones. It's really pretty amazing how they work. Now, other related to those are sea cucumbers here. They sometimes wash up in large numbers. You can see that there are stripes that are there. Those are the rows of the tube feet. Out in the front is their tentacles that are there. And I've seen them come washed up when there's been the storms, and there have been hundreds of them out there. It's just amazing. Not sure why. It's kind of the question of why were all of a sudden those by-the-wind sailors, the Valella there. Mother Nature works in odd ways. Here's a picture of its branchial tentacles that are out there picking stuff up out of the water. Here's another related. It's a brittle star. Brittle stars are amazing. If you think sea stars are cool, brittle stars are way better. They're kind of like Jack Skeleton. It's the skeleton, it's the way that they can move their arms. They are very fast. I mean, if you think about how fast a starfish moves, these guys could probably easily move that fast. But considering you're a starfish, that's pretty darn good.
What is that thing there on the bottom?
You have, here are the 5 legs, and that is this central disc. That's where most of the body is. Well, there's not a lot of body. Most of the organs start there, but a lot of them are pushed out to the outside. Let's see. There we go. Now, these groups are, it's the echinoderms, echino being spiny skin. That fits really well with the urchins. The urchins, you can see the spines. Now, we've got an example of an urchin that has been broken apart. You can see that in there, here are one pair, another pair, third pair, fourth, fifth, again, 5-part symmetry. It's on a circle. And so they have the same tube feet. They have a lot of the same characteristics, only their bones are fused together in what they call a test. The first introduction I had to this was a dive off Southern California, and some people had brought in some good dark red urchins. And they caught them up, pulled out the roe, the gonads, and mixed it with some cream cheese with some fresh French bread. It was outstanding. If you like sushi, if you like that. Unfortunately, well, because the systems out here are so messed up, we don't have urchins that are big and full. They're all, so many of them, and so many things have happened, you probably aren't going to be able to get uni around here. But if you get some, it goes for $60 for 2 ounces.
The purple urchin.
Purple urchin?
Purple urchin.
The purple urchin,
It's teeny and it's hard to get, but you can get it.
precisely. Yeah. And so, thank you, Lori. That's one of the characters. They're going to find them, but it takes a lot of work as opposed to something like this, that where the ecosystem is in balance and the gonads are big. So, now it's the sand dollars are also related to the urchins. You typically see this and you can't figure out why is it called a spiny skin, but in fact, that fuzz are a bunch of spines. They're more like paddles. You can sort of see them here. They'll move things around, move food around. You have gills that are up in there. And so they are very closely related again. Now, very quickly on anemones, and I will then shut up. Basically, they're just a tube. On the bottom, it's a thing to hold on. And the top, it's tentacles to feed that mouth in the middle. And these guys on the left are solitary ones. The ones on the right are colonial ones. The ones on the right, it starts out as a solitary one, but then it splits into 2. And those split into 4. And those split again and again. So you have a colony of identical, genetically identical anemones. And if you have another one over here, where they come up to each other, they will do battle. You'll have a no anemone area in between. And it's interesting to see how that territoriality works. Like I said, they're basically not much more than a cylinder, a way to hold on, way to get food into the middle. Again, very, very simple. They do have these stinging cells. It sort of deferred the comment before asking about, do the Valella have stinging cells? They do, but it's not that tough. But again, I wouldn't kiss one. Now here's comparing the anemones and the jellyfish. You take the anemone, flip it on its head. Instead of the pedal disc, you have the umbrella on the top. You have the tentacles hanging down, the mouth in the middle. So they're a good way of using one way of structuring your body and having multiple uses from it. All right, last little bit about hidden critters. I took this picture of putting a big rock over and found out that over here, going up, that's a limpet. It's a limpet that's not doing much, but if you can see closely, there are all sorts of tiny, tiny little spiral worms on the top of it and also around it. That's a theme we'll see. Here's another one, another picture. That's a baby starfish. It was hiding under there. And around it, it's also got a lot of those worms. This is a set of big tube worms. They make those calcareous tubes, cement it down. They're not going anywhere, but they too have lots of the little spiral worms around them. Continuing on, there's another worm, only this is a scale worm. So it's moving around, it has scales, it's free moving. It's probably out predating, trying to find stuff to eat. And this here is just a picture of a lot of those little spiral worms. So again, like I said, things there, the substrate is always being occupied. Space is premium. Now a little switch, it's more into Vicky's area than mine, is the artistic impressions that you can get and inspiration from that. People will collect the rocks that are out there and tumble them and make them beautiful. Vicky made this sea dragon, which was from a big piece of driftwood and then all the little pieces. And this is the one, the next one is what she told me she was going to make. It wasn't until I put it on the wall that I said, oh, that's what you were making. It's an elephant head. It's this big, and it's just amazing. So it's the sort of thing that use the ocean, use the stuff you find there, use it for your own creativity to make things interesting. Now let me talk about shore safety for a second. I mentioned about if it's shiny, it's slippery, so be careful with that. But that means you can walk over here, but you better have good shoes and be careful because you're walking on other animals. Also, you've heard about rogue waves. You've heard about high tide. You've heard about people doing stupid things and walking where they shouldn't be. I shot this video. Talk about doing stupid things. I don't have the video or the audio on, so you don't hear our comments as we're seeing, oh, we probably shouldn't be here. We learned. We are at the table. Okay, now just the last little bit about caring for it. Please care for this. I care for it deeply, and I'm pretty sure you all do, otherwise you wouldn't be here. Clean up the trash, yours and others. That backpack has that package of trash for it. Return rocks and critters to their home. Don't let it, rip it off and then say, ah, good luck there. Observe wet animals in the water. Don't take them out and leave them. Be gentle. Be nice. And for my own plug, you're probably familiar with climate change, global warming and such. 93% of the heat that's been trapped by the greenhouse gases has gone into the ocean. And if it weren't for that, the ocean trapping this, our heat, our temperature would be 63 degrees hotter than it is right now. Right now, it's about 59, 60 degrees. If it weren't for all that heat that's gone into the ocean, we would be at 122 degrees Fahrenheit, average around the entire globe. Clearly not sustainable. Now with that, I'll leave it, say, I'm part of Coastal SoCan, Southern Oregon Climate Action Now. I invite you to come talk to me if you're interested in learning more or helping out in trying to preserve this habitat that we need for our next generations. And with that, I ask questions. You ask questions. Or you can leave because I went way over. I apologize for that.
I've been here for 20 years, and there used to be, I thought they were called sea stars, like 19 legs, and they move around, and they're big.
Yes.
They're 2-3 feet across.
Yes.
I don't see them anymore. I wonder if you know what's happening.
Absolutely. Those are basket stars. When I'm trying to remember the sunflower stars. And they have many, many legs. I've seen them as 24, 36. They don't seem to fit the 5-part symmetry. They are they're a top species for controlling sea urchins. Several years ago, less than a decade ago, there was the sea star's wasting disease. It just decimated many of the sea stars. Most of them were maybe 90% wiped out. These guys were about 99% wiped out. Now the problem is because they are a top predator, they kept the urchins, thank you, in check. Now by not having the urchins in check, remember I said that the kelp was annual, it had to grow every year? Well, the urchins are all there, and as Lori had said, that you can have the urchins there, and you can, if you work hard enough, you can find the gonads. But right now it's tough because they can't get a lot of food. That's because they're decimating the kelp bed. And so the question is a very good one. There is a whole lab that's dedicated for sea star, specifically the sunflower star, to repopulate it. And so the hope is, because that's a keystone species, it's required for a healthy kelp bed. And so much else is required for the health of a kelp bed, and we are really reliant on it as well. Thank you for that. Very good question. Yeah.
Going back to the black tar algae, I've seen some that's pink in color. Is that a similar algae?
I assume so. Yeah, it's more of morphology. The plants and the marine critters are incredibly adaptable. Yeah. Lori.
Is a big skate like a manta ray? Does it have a poison tipped tail?
Well, manta rays don't have poison tipped tails. That's a stingray, and yeah, and they're all the same.
Poison tips, so that's why I'm asking.
Yeah, yeah. If you get hit by a stingray, it can be very painful. And if you get hit in the wrong spot, who is it?
Irwin.
Yeah, he got one in the heart.
Was that a stingray or a manta ray that killed him?
That would have been a stingray.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and manta rays they don't have the barb in the back. And so, the rays we have here, I'm not aware of any that are stingrays, but I'm not a stingray biologist. There are other places that you do find them, Southern California as well, so. Yep. Yeah.
So can the sea anemones move? Because I've seen like when the sand shifts, when the sand changes, you've got rocks with sea anemones and stars on them, and then all of a sudden sand comes in and covers it up.
Yeah.
These stars can move. Can the anemones move? And with the tidal changes, sometimes at a high tide, when the tides are high, you see anemones all over the rocks.
Yeah.
But what happens when the tides don't reach that area? Do they die or do they move?
It depends on a variety of things, but they can move, but just very slowly. I mean, they make sea stars look fast, but they are capable of moving around. And so if the change is slow enough, if the sand is coming up slowly enough, then they can adapt to that. Depends on where they're going. If sand keeps coming up and they're pushed up to an area they can't tolerate the drying, then that's a problem for them. Yeah.
So is it true that you should not touch a sea star? Like if you find one on the sand, you should not put it back in the water, or you should not touch it? Is that, because that's kind of this myth, and I've always wondered if you should or you shouldn't.
I've never hesitated touching a sea star. If you see them up on the sand, it might be a sand-dwelling sea star. There are those. So putting them back in the water is probably good, but there are a variety of reasons. Why did it detach in the first place? Did it get caught?
Sometimes they're just on the sand, like they floated in.
Yeah. Some of them die and they're washed up. Others.
So, but it doesn't matter if you touch them.
I don't think so. I haven't ever. I've touched many. The sea stars tend to be very resilient, which is good. So.
So thank you for your. If you want to look at this up, feel free to